Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julie Rogers Bascom, and I'm with the National Youth Leadership Council in St. Paul, Minnesota, NYLC. I'm thrilled to be here at your virtual conference. We've been doing a lot of those, haven't we? You know, eye rolls. It'll be wonderful to be back in person, and I look forward to that. While we are getting started and while I pull up my slides, I see there's a little over 30 of us, which is fabulous. I'm glad you're here with me. I'd like you to pull up your chat and get us going to make sure that we try to stay engaged. It's at the end of the day. I think we're the same time frame. I'm Central. Are you all Central? Yeah. Yeah, I see some heads nodding. Yeah. So it's late in the day, so we're going to try to keep the air flowing. I am standing up, and that always helps me. Young people, I tell young people all the time that you're 7% smarter when you're standing up, and they ask me, well, why don't we take our tests standing up? And I ask them, well, why don't you? That's an opportunity for a service learning experience. So that's really what I'm going to talk to you about. But before we get started, in the chat, put your favorite number, your favorite color, your favorite season. So open up the chat, put your favorite number, your favorite color, your favorite season, just to get your fingers moving and to be thinking. So go ahead and start putting that in the chat, and I am going to get ready to share my screen. All right, what do we see in here? 3, rose gold and summer. Oh yes, Christine, fall, yes, fall. So, favorite number 45, Juanicia, why 45? I'm always interested. Candace, you like the color pink and purple and yellow and spring, teal, yes. Royal blue, number 2. Royal blue, favorite color. Red, my basketball number, Juanicia. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's fabulous. That's fabulous. Thank you for engaging in just our kind of kickoff. Let's get to know each other a little bit better. Somebody else likes green. I think green is one of my favorite colors. That kind of hunter green that always makes me feel rested and peaceful. So NYLC is a national nonprofit. As I mentioned, we're out of St. Paul, and we're almost 40 years old. We've been working with young leaders and educators and advancing the field of service learning. So those are the 3 buckets that we do. And I really hope that you have a chance to look out at some of the resources that we have.
I see the lady.
There we go. So we really want to embrace.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
We really want young people to be able to be change makers. And we do that by using service learning as a strategy to support young leaders. We also work with teachers to help them find the resources and the kind of the how-tos. How do you do a service learning project? And we also work closely with a national coalition on service learning. And there's actually a lot of conversation in the legislature right now to connect service learning, civic education, and public service. So it's one of the things that I hope that we keep in mind while we are doing this work. So as we progress here, I want to tell you a little bit about the goals of today's session. I want to look the differences between community service and service learning. There are subtle differences. Both are good and important work. But one of the things that stands out with service learning is that there are youth outcomes that can be planned for, that can be measured, and that really lead to the work that you're doing with young people. It is not just an experience. It is about growing young people's leadership skills, but also their ability to be active citizens. I want to also talk a little bit about what makes quality service learning. I'll tell you briefly about a 4-step process that we like to use. And then I'm going to show you how to get to some links on our website to access resources, some handbooks. These are all free, a guide on how to get started, some how-tos. So that's my goal for today. So before we get started, and I do this, I do a lot of, my title is I'm the Director of Learning and Leadership. And as a teacher, I know that sometimes what I have to do as a teacher and for myself, but also for my students, is to take a pause and to prepare myself and set an intention. So I'd like us to take a moment just to settle in to first, and however that is if centering and preparing, if it's sitting, if it's standing, if it's making sure your back is straight, just prepare for a quiet moment, for a pause. I'd like you all to take a moment and listen to your surroundings right now. Are you hearing traffic? Are you hearing your cat purring? Are you hearing conversation out in the next room? Take a moment and just pause to hear what is in your surroundings. Now take another moment to center yourself. For some people, that means making sure their shoulders are relaxed. And sometimes they do that by scrunching them up and then scrunching them down. For some people, centering themselves means to take a deep breath and slowly blow it out to center yourself. Our next moment is about setting an intention. So we talked a little bit about our goals for today, what it was that I hope that we accomplish during this hour and a half. I'd like you to consider, what is it that you would like to get from this hour and a half? Is it to consider the projects and the experiences that you already have? Is it to understand what service learning is? Is it to help you jumpstart? Take a moment and set an intention. Thank you. Our next task for me, and thank you for following along with me. It really helps me to stand here and just make sure that my shoulders are down, that I've taken some deep breaths so I can be fully present with you. My next task is to do a Slido poll. And what this does is allow all of us, since we can't be together, it allows us to know who's in the room. So I'd like you to take your cell phone and you can hover it over that QR code, either by opening your QR reader or opening your camera. It'll take you to a website so you can answer that question. And you can answer it by just typing it in. This will create a word cloud. If you don't have access to a phone and you're on a computer, you can open up another window and enter the code 178316. So I'm going to test that right now. I'm going to open my camera. Oh, some people are doing it, so it must be working. In Chrome. Teacher, oh, so we've got some teachers here. Oh, good, I've got a great new resource that I think is really interesting for teachers in classroom work. All right, so we've got about 7, 8 teachers, school site coordinator. All right, terrific. I think this is also a great time to talk about some of the connections between in school and out of school, because I think service learning is one of those strategies that can really bridge those experiences. So lots of site coordinators and program managers. I'm going to take note of that. Teachers. 18 people. Other people, if you want to put it in the chat, I'm happy to put that in. Oh, here's the teacher and a site coordinator. All right, I'm going to put that in for you. School counselor by day, site coordinator by afternoon. I like that. Sort of sounds like a superhero title. So I'm seeing some teachers and site coordinators. So we're talking a lot about and school counselors. So service learning, as we continue to talk a little bit more, OSC administrator. I'm going to mute somebody. As we talk a little bit more, I'd like us to consider too that how social emotional learning can be one of those outcomes of service learning, of quality service learning. I'm going to give it just a minute or less than a minute, just to see if anybody else wants to chime in and let me know who you are. This is also, if you're still continuing to do virtual learning with young people, this is a great tool, slido.com, because it's not reliant on doing a lot of input before. It's a free application, and it's kind of fun to build word clouds like this. All right, I'm going to go ahead, and I want to thank the 27 people who were participating. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. All right, just to kind of ground us in some of the reasons why we have, why service learning is a pedagogy or an instructional strategy. When I look at the learning pyramid, and this is about retention, this is about kind of the why we do service learning. And I have a story I'll tell you, but when we look at this pyramid, we see that lecture and reading, you think about the ways that we want to instruct young people or we want to teach them about something, those have the lowest amounts of retention rate. I think we probably know, and this is my story, there was this wonderful woman in my 11th grade world history class. And she stood at the podium. Maybe this is more an indication of my age rather than anything else, but she stood at the podium and she just read from her list. She was a learned person, but that's how instruction or imparting life skills, that's how it was done. I don't remember a thing about world history because it didn't engage those parts of me that needed to be engaged to retain that information. Audio, visual, demonstration, discussion. But then when you get down to practice doing and teaching others, you see that it has such a higher retention rate. That's sort of the academic why of why we do service learning. One of the things that I like to start off with as well is a discussion about terms, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about the difference between community service and service learning. And so it's important for us to understand. Both are good and important strategies and projects and efforts. But I'll tell you that one of the things that I think is really important is to add some of those extras to community service. And I'm hoping you don't go, oh no, she's wanting me to do one more thing. I think there are ways to tweak your experiences in your classroom or in your out of school program where it gets to those hope for outcomes or those goals that are good for young people. So community service, I define community service as an activity that engages people in addressing needs of their schools and community. Again, I call this good and important work. Planting a tree, visiting senior citizens in a senior citizen home, running a food drive. Those are community service projects, good and important. And certainly there are great outcomes from that. Now, service learning, if you would Google service learning, the definition, you would probably come up with 250 some definitions. There's just that many different nuances. So for the purpose of our conversation, this is the definition that NYLC uses. We talk about it as an approach to teaching and learning. So again, it's not just a project, it's a process. So it's really a way to impart knowledge and experience and grow skills. So an approach to teaching and learning that uses academic knowledge and civic skills. So young people are actually using what they know and they are growing a set of knowledge as well during the process. So that's one of the hoped for outcomes. And it might be academic, it might be life skills. There's a lot of important opportunities, social emotional learning, working as a team, understanding different perspectives, developing empathy. Those kind of academic and life and civic skills are really important during this process. And it also, communities or service learning is about meeting genuine community needs. And we're going to step into, in a few minutes, we'll step into something that we call standards. And while it sounds like, oh no, one more layer, I mean, once you look at some experiences and some projects, you'll see that you can see why we would want to include the best of opportunity. So in the chat, everybody pull up your chat again, please. And I want to know, how have you engaged in community service or service learning in your work, with your family, or in your community? Just curious. Just curious. Open up your chat. Let's see if I can get you to engage. You've got 55 people. So Brenda Turner from Monroe City Schools. Tell me what you've been doing. What have you done with community service or service learning? Not a test. Mangrove planting before. Okay, Christine May. Mangrove. Yeah, I'm up in Minnesota and I don't know if I know a whole lot about mangroves. I know up here we have invasive species called buckthorn. So we do a lot of buckthorn removal. Local church pass out food bags to people in need of food. Important work. Yes. Food drives. Yes. And I think one of the things with our young people, they are growing more and more aware of some of the economic challenges of our neighbors. Okay, Gay Lynn, you're doing something with Valentine Day cards for the sick members of the church. Awesome. Awesome. Personal care items for the homeless, hope for the homeless, yes. Care packages for individuals affected by COVID-19. Oh my gosh. Food drive for flood victims, church activities in the community. Awesome. That's really fabulous work. And community cleanup of unkept areas. Isn't that the truth? There's never a loss of opportunities. The our church ministry as a Sunday school teacher, absolutely. You're imparting knowledge and supporting young people to grow in their faith and their wisdom journey. Awesome. Thank you. Toy drive for children. Absolutely. Community service project for Head Start. Collecting sanitizing products and classroom supplies for them. Work with the elderly and complete small projects for them, cleaning up the yard. Oh, what a great opportunity for young people too, to see, number one, to see that for the seniors, to see that there are young people that have, that are the answer to some of our problems in our community, which I think is a real different twist, because I remember hearing, oh, kids these days. That's what I heard when I was growing up. But now I think we have an opportunity to go, kids these days, because I'm telling you, I hear so many stories of kids coming up with ways to change the world, and not just the Greta Thunbergs of the world. I hear stories of kids doing little, it's like a trim tab. A trim tab on a ship are these little levers that when the captain moves the little trim tab, it creates a big motion. It's a slow motion, but it's a big motion. I don't have any kind of, you probably all have far more oceanic background in your space, but I think about that. Sometimes it's the small things with just a tiny effort that has such a tremendous impact. So thank you all of you for participating and just jumping in on that. So I'm going to go to our next slide, which is getting down into some of the aspects that I want you to consider. And I want you to consider, and again, there is no judgment here at all. I'm just saying that these are some ways that you can include to move, if you're doing a community service project, to move to more service learning, because we know that these are from research, we know that these are the elements that really have a greater impact on our young people. And we're not doing service or service learning for kids to go, oh, I feel really good about that, I must be a great person. We're doing it because we want young people to be leaders. We are doing it because we want them to solve some of our community problems. We want them to have the life skills they need to be successful. And I truly believe that these kinds of experiences can get us there. The first standard of service learning that we talk about is meaningful service. Now, one of the things that the store, is it important for the community? Is it what the community thinks they need? Oftentimes we can go into a community space and say, well, you need to do this, so I'm going to make sure that you do this, or I'm going to build this for you because this is what I want you to have. This is what I think you need. So that's a really important, especially in the time right now with some of our awareness of economic inequality and racial inequality. I think it's really important to ground ourselves in the meaningful service and what the community needs. For instance, I wasn't working with this group. This was a group of students and their teacher. And the teacher said, we're going to make tie blankets. Now, maybe you down in Louisiana don't make tie blankets, but up here in Minnesota, we do that a lot. You take a piece of fleece and you put another piece of fleece on the bottom of it. You cut little slits around and then you tie those all along. So there's a fleece blanket. So the parents went out and got the fleece, and the kids came to the cafeteria and they had a great time and they made these fleece blankets. Number one, they didn't know where they were going. So there was kind of they were having fun. And again, that's not bad, but there was an opportunity to learn more about where they were going. The adult had already decided it was going to go to the local homeless shelter, a really important service and an important act for that group. The parents brought the blankets over and the volunteer coordinator said, okay, thanks. And the parents were a little bit taken back. Okay, they were an affluent community, and I think there was some issues there. It really reinforced some stereotypes, and that's another thing that it's really important. So next year, the teacher came to me and said, this didn't work, and let me tell you what happened. So he told me that, and I said, did anybody talk to the shelter before or after? And he said, I don't think so. So we actually had one of the students call the shelter and call up the executive director of Simpson Housing and say, we made these blankets last year and it felt like you didn't like them or want them, or we'd like to do something for you. And the executive director said, we love that you all want to help out. And we would love blankets, but you made them in the wrong size. So they had taken a yard of fabric and it didn't cover the men who were sleeping on the mats. So just checking to make sure, just a simple thing like that. So they made the blankets. They had someone from the homeless shelter come in and talk about homelessness and kind of dispel some of those myths around homelessness. And I talk a lot. We talk about people who are experiencing homelessness rather than a homeless person. And the kids will tell you, when you say, why do we say that? They'll say, well, because we're talking about their person first rather than their condition. Just a real big shift in how we think about others. So that's one of my favorite stories that has really stuck with me. And it has stuck with some of the young people that I still stay in touch with. The next one, link to curriculum. And I like to say, I like to add to this because that's what I feel like I can do. I can add to the research, but link to curriculum doesn't mean just academic curriculum. It also means link to learning. So what are those skills you want young people? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. What are those skills that we want young people to attain? What do we want them to be able to know and do? And that, I think, in the 20 plus years I've been doing service learning, both in schools and out of schools and working with districts and programs, I think that's one of the biggest ahas for me, is that it's not just about doing the action. It's about what is it that we want our young people, what are our hope for outcomes? That really changed my perception of this process. Reflection. Reflection before, during, and after. For instance, I'll use that same experience of going to making the blankets. The young people, the second time around, they did a lot of reflecting before by reading about local homelessness numbers. And let me tell you, in Minnesota, when it's 35 below and the wind chill is 55 below, the issues around homelessness are very, very extreme. So they did a lot of thinking about that. What does that feel like? What would you ask a person who is experiencing homelessness? Do you know anyone? What's your experience? Have you ever talked to someone who's experiencing homelessness? So they did a lot of that beforehand. And they also talked to the center to see what it is that they could provide. They talked during the process while they were making the tie blankets. They also had some sentence stems on each of the tables so they could ask each other questions. So they were continuing to talk about it because, again, this wasn't about just feeling good about the good you can do for those people. It was about deeper things. I think one of the opportunities with service learning is that we can help young people kind of dig. Homelessness is not in and of itself just the issue. There are underlying issues around homelessness. And those sixth graders were really amazed when they learned that sometimes people who are experiencing homelessness, they have a job, they have a family. So those kind of awarenesses while they're doing the activity, and then the reflection afterwards. That's always, how do you feel? How did it go? What could be better? What would you do differently? What still needs to be done? And I think that's also an important thing for young people to remember, that the third graders who are trying to solve world hunger, that's a pretty heavy load for a young person. But doing a food drive and knowing that you're making an impact, but young people shouldn't be expected to change the whole system, but they are, I think, expected to understand that it's not in a vacuum. It is not a problem without underlying causes. And that's a different conversation with a third grader as opposed to a 10th grader. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and my friend Ashley, who is with me here, will help me remember to look at the chat, because sometimes I'm looking at your faces and I don't always look at the chat. So feel free, if you have questions or comments, please put them in, because that's really valuable for not only you to connect with me, but for you to connect with the other people on the call. The next standard is diversity. And I think we do certainly a lot of talk right now. And remember, I'm in the land of George Floyd in Minneapolis. We do a lot of conversations with young people around race, white privilege, and equity and inclusion. So that is part of it. So it's some of those conversations, age appropriate, but it's also about diverse perspectives. I'll tell you another story. These are my 7th grade students. Their issue that they were working on in science, the standard they were meeting was human impact on the environment. So we didn't tell them what they needed to, we didn't tell them the project. We told them the issue. We told them we're going to walk around the school and see what it is, what kind of problems that we see that we would like to address. So this was like 300 kids. So we did it in classrooms, and we walked around, and some of the young people noticed the assets, like there were speed bumps. That is an asset, because it shows that the community cares about their young people. They noticed that there were stop signs. They noticed that there was a parking lot for the cars. They also noticed dog droppings. People weren't cleaning up after their dogs. They noticed there was standing water. They noticed that in the creek behind the school, there was a lot of garbage. One of the efforts that a group of young people decided to focus on was that there was a lot of salt on the sidewalk and in the parking lot, because in Minnesota, we have this stuff called ice, and it's slippery. And I'm here to tell you, I broke 2 wrists, not at the same time, from slipping on the ice. So I know it's a real issue. But the kids thought that salt, they had talked to somebody from the watershed district. They had come out and done some conversation with the young people. That's about investigation, which is really important. They noticed then that there was too much salt, and they were 7th grade. They were just indignant. Well, we're going to try and get the custodians to stop putting salt, because it's going into the river, and we know that the river is contaminated with too much salt. So we invited the custodians to come in and talk, and the young people immediately jumped to a solution, which is another issue. It's like ready, go, not ready, set, go, which is really what we want our kids to, that's a skill, including myself, that we need to practice. So they were talking to the custodians, and they said, well, why, we practiced writing good questions, why do you use salt? And they said, well, because it melts the ice so people are safe. Well, we know that it's going down into the drains, and what would happen if you didn't put salt on the sidewalks? Well, and the custodian said, well, there was a woman the other day that there was a patch that didn't have, there's a patch of ice that didn't have any salt, and she slipped and fell, and she broke her hip. And so all of a sudden, just that little change in perspective, that little bit of change of, oh, I hadn't thought about them, help them look at it from with a different lens. So really, really important to get different perspectives, that diversity, that and I sometimes teach something about respectful conversations in schools. How do we have respectful conversations? It's really about listening, trying to understand another perspective. The next standard that we talk about is youth voice. And I think that's gotten a lot of buzz lately. I don't know. What do you think? Have you heard a lot about youth voice, youth engagement, youth leadership, that sort of thing? So it's sort of, Galen, it's sort of like the another initiative, right? And sometimes if you just wait till maybe that initiative will go away, but we're here to tell you that this is one of the ways that you engage young people in these kind of efforts. I know that if somebody tells me that I have to go clean up a river because that's what I've been told to do, I'm going to come with a different attitude. But if somebody says, let's work on this park here. This park has some needs. I want you to take a look at it and find out what are ways that we could make this place a better place for our community. And they walk around and they go, well, we're really seeing that there's a real problem with some bottles in the creek right now. I wonder why that is. Well, I wonder if there's a place to throw them away. Yeah, there's a garbage can, but it doesn't look like it's being dumped. So what do you have to do? Who else do you need to talk to? So all of a sudden, that series of questions engages young people and youth, that youth voice, that youth leadership. And all of a sudden they realize, and I'm exaggerating a little bit. Can you tell that sometimes I exaggerate? But all of a sudden, those young people are not just looking at the creek at that park. They're looking up the creek because they're seeing garbage coming down the creek, and they know that something else is happening up the creek. So then they realize that there's more to be done. So all of a sudden, you've got young people who are now adopting this river, this creek. So again, youth voice is such a powerful tool. We also talk a lot in our work about youth adult partnerships. And we have several webinars on our website, nylc.org, where you can look at these webinars to learn more about what that really means. And that really is, I think, one of the strategies that helps young people learn from adults, and it also helps young people see the young people in a different light. Partnerships. I kind of talked a little bit about that and gave some examples. So it's not only the youth who are, or the adults who are working with the young people, it's also the community organizations that love to work with young people. The boys I was telling you about, well, they were a group of boys who were wanting to solve a problem with the salt in the storm drains. Well, they decided after research, and they really did some research, they decided that they were going to propose a change in the city's statute or city building code, that they wanted new construction to include 10% permeable surfaces. Now, these are seventh graders. I have to tell you, when I was in seventh grade, I didn't know what a permeable surface was, but they decided that they were going to make a presentation to the city council. So they got all dressed up in their little ties and their little white shirts, and they showed up and they had practiced and rehearsed. Now think about the skills that are happening right now. Right now, at that point, they are building skills about how to make a presentation. They needed to know their stuff. They were talking to real representatives. And I mean, this was the real deal. They made their presentation with the help of adults, adult partners. They didn't get it passed, and they were very disappointed. But think about and sometimes this projects don't end up how you want them to be. Sometimes it's the process, again, rather than just the project's outcome. But what did happen is the city council the next year came to me and said, we want to listen to the kids. What do the kids want us to do? We really appreciated what they had to say. So again, another outcome that I hadn't thought of that was a possibility. So again, partnerships, really important. The next two standards, progress monitoring, if you are assessing this, connecting it to your standards, if you're a teacher, connecting it to your standards, you're already doing that. You're doing some kind of assessments, formative or summative assessments. If you're in the out of school world, you're really following the process. You have already identified what you hope young people will be getting from this experience. So just be mindful and just check in on that. It's also when you get to some of those planning stages, that's another time for you to do some progress monitoring. And then our last one, duration and intensity. That's really about, we know from the research that the stronger impacts on learning, on life skill development, on social emotional learning, we know that when it is a stronger impact when it lasts longer and it goes deeper. There are always going to be one and done kind of projects. And I'm not here to say that everything has to be service learning, although I think in terms of that, there's always ways to expand those kinds of projects. But if you're looking for ways to have a great impact on young people, then consider what that might look like. I'm going to pause for a minute just to let you do some reading, because I've been talking for a minute, and sometimes we need to use a different modality in learning. So I'm going to give you a minute just to read the difference between volunteering, community service volunteering, and community service. And if anyone has a question or if something resonates, please feel free to unmute right now and make a comment, because I really invite that. Any thoughts? Or put it in the chat. I'm going to move ahead. Now here, I'm just going to demonstrate what this could look like, how you take a community service project and move it closer to service learning. It doesn't have to. This is not a judgment, but if you're looking for ways to move it towards service learning, these are just a few thoughts. So Sally's Girl Scout troop wants to host a food drive. Good and important work. Hosting a food drive is a community service, but to make it service learning, what Sally could do is connect it to meaningful service by asking the food shelf what they are in need of right now. So again, they're tapping into the meaningful service. I think about some other ways to make that more of a service learning. I think about the connections to science, to daily recommended what the My Plate is, where what do you need? Fruits, vegetables, proteins, carbohydrates, dairy, meat, that sort of thing. So think about how they might use that investigation to learn about themselves, but also to share that. So maybe it's having a protein food drive, or maybe having a cereal food drive, or maybe it's about feminine hygiene products for a food drive. So asking what is needed, but also digging deeper into kind of the why. Any other thoughts? How else could you take a food drive and move a food drive? And let's face it, some of the food drives are bring a can, bring 2 cans, and the classroom that gets the most will get a pizza party. I've seen sometimes what ends up on the food shelf: anchovies, outdated cans of beans, or maybe things that people don't want to use anymore. So that's also a learning opportunity. Anybody have some ideas of how to move it towards service learning? Great, Galen, you're moving towards service learning. That's awesome. Good and important work. Any ideas on how to take the Girl Scout food drive? We'll go ahead to the second one, the second example. John's Environmental Club. I think there's a lot of both elementary, middle, and high school elementary clubs that adopt a park. They want to clean up a park. So this is their experience. They're going to clean up a park. Oh, Galen, thank you. You can turn the food drive into a lesson about homelessness and how this may come to pass. All right, awesome. Connecting it to some of the underlying issues. Awesome. So with John's Environmental Club, one of the things that we thought of is they could link to curriculum by interviewing the local DNR or water quality specialists. Again, that's getting that's linked to curriculum, but it's also that diversity. So it's really understanding some of the issues in the park. And Patricia, yes, fresh fruits and vegetables. Absolutely. That's a great thing to focus on, because quite frankly, it's hard sometimes for food shelves to have the fresh fruits and vegetables. And that's an opportunity to talk about. I've actually seen fourth graders learn about food deserts. They'd never known that that was a thing. So opening up eyes and consciousness for that. So I joke about this, but it's one of the most, it's a mind shift. It's not just a project, it is a process. So what else? I mean, certainly there are times that we are going to do a project because that is going to allow us to get something done, to get it jump started, which is again an entry point. But consider what you can do to make this a process. I'm really quickly going to go over this some of the nuts and bolts of kind of our backwards design planning. And this is when we really start with an area or hope for outcome. So there are 4 stages to this. Identify youth outcomes. I've talked a lot about that. Determining acceptable evidence. We've talked a little bit about that. What we haven't talked a lot about is the whole IPARD youth experience stage. And that's, I mentioned investigation. We'll dig into that the next slide, just a minute. And then self-assessment at the end of your service learning experience. What happened? Why did it happen? And what still needs to be done? So that's a quick overview of the stages of service learning that we teach, and that our resources that are free to you will help you process through. So just take a minute and look at, if you could look at this graphic. I'm messing around with some other things up here. So look at this graphic. We talk about the steps, these 5 steps in the student learning cycle: investigation, planning, preparing, action, reflection, and demonstration. I want to point out that the service pie, the actual service, is smaller than the other 2 pieces. They're not really pie shaped, they're kind of extended pie shapes, but it's actually not just the focus. So in a service learning experience, you're really focusing on having young people investigate. One of my favorite experiences, I was working with a group of 4th grade students. They decided that the issue that they wanted to address in their community was how to make their school a more welcoming place. So after we had gone through, this was tied to some academic standards, and we knew that there was going to be some assessment. So we started with investigation, and I talked to them about 4 different ways to investigate. One is you can use media, like the internet or books and magazines and newspapers. Newspapers are a great way to investigate some of the community problems. I mean, one of the ways for young people to look at, what do I need to solve? You look at the front page, there's a whole bunch, or the Metro section. So one of they started doing some research on the internet. One girl, she blew me away. She found some research that showed what happens to your brain when you don't feel safe. So they went from feeling welcome to not feeling safe. But she made the connection that what happens to your brain when you're in that fight or flight mode, and these are my words, not hers, but how that had an impact. So there was some of her reason why she would want to do a service learning project, because she wanted young people. She wanted her classmates and her schoolmates to feel welcome. So there's ways you can do teach young people how to ask really good questions to help investigate. And I think that's a skill as well, to teach young people how to ask good questions. There's something called a Q matrix. And if you ever want to talk a little bit more, send me an email. You'll have my email at the end of this, but send me an email and I'll send you a chart, and it indicates how to teach young people how to ask good questions. Or you can look it up. It's called a Q matrix or question matrix. But that investigation stage, that was the one of the strategies she used. The teacher of this class also knew that one of her students' parents was in market research. So she had the parent, I think it was a mother, come in and talk about how do you do an interview. They were going to, one of the ways that they were going to investigate was they were going to ask other kids, which I think is such a simple strategy. But think about the skills that those young people were gaining. They had to learn how to write good questions. They had to be aware of how to ask those kind of questions. And the parent who was helping support them would say things like, when you're meeting with kindergartners, don't stand over them. Make sure you get eye to them, because that's going to make them feel more comfortable and you'll get better answers to your questions. So think about that kind of social emotional learning. That was just brilliant to me. Another strategy for young people to investigate is to observe. One of the things that the fourth graders did is they went out in the schoolyard, they went in the lunchroom, they went in the hallways, and they went in when kids were dropped off of the bus or when they were getting on the bus. And so they were looking for, and we had done some discussion about what does it look like? What are you looking for? How are you going to measure it? But they were observing where they thought young people, my other classmates, might not be feeling welcome. So then they took all the investigation. They had lots of data. This was a year-round class. You can't always do this in a 2-week or a 3-week kind of span, but they had a big chunk of time because it was connected to their curriculum. They came up, and this is the point where you decide on what kind of action. We didn't start off with the project. We started off with the problem. So the young people decided they were going to take a couple of actions. Let me think here for a minute. Oh, one of the things that they realized from the observations of the playground, they saw that sometimes kids were just standing around and they didn't have anybody to play with. So they came up with 2 solutions. One, they created a buddy bench where young people could go and sit. If they didn't have anybody to play with, they would sit on the buddy bench. And this team, this 4th grade classroom, it was their responsibility to go up and to play with this young person. The other strategy they used outside, I know, isn't that great? Another strategy they used is that they took over some of the game playing. They led the games and they made sure that people on I think it was in the morning before school, where kids, before they got into the classrooms, they were able to go outside and play. And because there was limited amount of staff, the kids rotated who would be in charge of coming up with a game and making sure everybody was included. Talk about leadership skill development. And that was a pretty powerful experience for them. One of the other things they did is they noticed that sometimes during not passing time, but coming off of the bus and going out to the bus, it's kind of chaotic. And for kids who maybe had sensory issues or were too much activity, what they decided is they would come up, and they did this research. They knew that when you played music, it calmed people down. So they came up with a playlist, and they had to go to the teacher, to the principal, and present this as a solution. So that to me was such an example of a real high quality service learning experience, because it was youth voice. It really identified a true need that the young people came up with. Now, that would have been a whole nother kind of experience for that classroom if the teacher would have come in and said, I think we need to change our school. We need to make our school better. And this is what I want you to do. Those young people felt proud of their efforts. And one of the ways, well, we'll get to demonstration, but there was a lot of investigation and a lot of new knowledge and awareness. And it wasn't just content specific awareness. The next step is planning and preparing. So while I gave you the examples of the action that they took, there was a lot of planning and preparation that went into that. They had to come up with the list of songs. They had to okay it with the principal. And quite frankly, the principal, who's a dear person, was a little bit, what? You don't think our school is welcoming enough? You think this is a problem? And quite frankly, I would not say that this was it was a suburban, comfortable, I don't want to say affluent, but well-resourced school. So there was some things that it took the principal it took her for a blink there, but it also showed her she was comfortable enough to allow them to research this and to come up with suggestions. She was very pleased with the outcome because it just reaffirmed how this is a group process. It's not just up to the adults or to the young people, but that collaboration between the two groups was really critical in making that a successful example of really a place of high quality service learning. Next stage is action. And I talked about action, but I want you, when you think about action, I want you to think about not just like direct or indirect service. I want you to also think about awareness. When you create awareness of an issue, that is a service learning experience. If you're doing if the fourth graders are educating the second graders on how to do a good interview, or they're developing a playlist that young people can play at home, or if there is awareness creating, that is service learning. Also, advocacy. I think when young people advocate, that is another type of service learning, and that might be advocating for a law or something that's in place, or it might be advocating for a change in perspective. Reflection, we've talked a little bit about that before, during, and after. And as you can see, that ring in that diagram goes around and around. And then the last part of the service learning cycle is demonstration. D is for demonstration. And that's important too, because it's sort of like closing. There's a group of young students that are actually high school students, young people that I work with. And after every hour that we're together, they close off our time together with a dad joke. And that's sort of a ritual. Well, demonstration is sort of a ritual for the service learning. It's a time to show the world, what a community, what you've learned and how you served. And you can do that in kind of a science fair kind of way, or you can do it with a letter to the editor or an article in a parent newsletter, but just some way to demonstrate what the young people have done, how they have served, and how the impact that they have made. Questions or comments so far? I'm doing a lot of talking here, a lot of talking. Okay, we'll go ahead. All right, I'm gonna just take a pause right now. Everybody stand up, turn your cameras off if you want to, but everybody stand up. I've been talking for almost a whole hour and I haven't done a whole lot of engagement. So what I want you to do is start with your right arm. Shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it. Shake it out, shake your right arm out, shake it out. Now do it with your left. Left arm, shake it out. Yes, 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 yes. Whatever you have to do with your shoulders, shake them out. Now take your right foot, shake it 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now the other one, the left one. That's the other right one. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now big deep breath. Oh. I don't know, an hour long. They tell us that people lose connection after about 12 minutes. All right, whatever you need to do to just kind of get yourself right back into the saddle. It's a good image, isn't it? All right. They do tell me it's true that if you stand up and you have oxygen coming into your brain, that it helps you. It helps you. Now, I'm going to go through this kind of fast because I want you to get into a few, I want to spend a little time talking about what it is why you want to use service learning. So while I'm going through this, think about what are the ones that resonate with you? What are the ones that resonate with you? Why do we do service and what's in it for young people? Personal development, I think about critical thinking. I think about creativity. I think about collaboration. I think about communication, those C's, those 4 C's, right? I think in some of the examples I've shared with you, you've seen how that can be an outcome. I think about the social emotional learning competencies. I think about self-awareness and self-management and social awareness and relationship skills and decision making, because often these kinds of experiences require young people to work together in a group. clearly the academic and cognitive development that comes along with these kinds of experiences. I think about the young people learning about permeable surfaces. I think about the fourth graders learning about brain development. So I think those are a good why to do this for young people. And I do think you can do this in school and out of school. Really important connection there. I think about civic engagement competencies. I think part of our goal of education and working with young people is to impart knowledge, but I think it's also about creating engaged citizens. We want our young people to show up at the voting booth, but we also want them to say, something's not right here. What do we need to change? And I really believe that as I age, and I'm probably a lot older than most of you on this call, even though I don't see all your faces, I'm encouraged that the young people that I've been working with are going to make decisions that impact not just them, but it's going to impact me. And I think they're going to, I really trust that they're making those good decisions, partly because of the skills that they've developed during this process. What's in it for teachers or youth workers? You know, I think, how many of us remember this? I think about my world history teacher. Why do we have to learn this? Service learning in school and out of school is the real world. You're dealing with real world issues. You're dealing with real people and things that matter. And it's different than project-based learning. I love project-based learning. I think service learning is project-based learning on steroids. So it's actually a real life experience. I think it encourages student ownership and engagement. Some teachers have told me that once they get into that groove of using service learning, it's really sharing the workload. It's really putting it on the young person to come up with the strategies. So they're still meeting their academic standards, but the young people are doing the heavy lift. It's also a lot about community, Next group that I like to talk about is why service learning, what's in it for the community? Well, I don't have this in this slide deck right now, but if you Google India tree video, if somebody could put that in the chat, India tree video. There's this wonderful 2-minute video of a young boy, and it takes place in India, and he comes to a tree in the road, and all the cars have stopped, and the adults are sitting back, and they're kind of mad, and they're trying to figure out, okay, who's going to take care of this? Well, this little boy steps up, maybe you've seen this, steps up and starts pushing the tree. He's all of about 5. And he starts pushing the tree. Now it starts raining, right? So it's just this horrible situation, but he's got energy, he's got perspective, he's got stick-to-itiveness. All of a sudden, other kids start showing up to help him push. And then all of a sudden, the adults are getting out of their cars and they're getting wet. And the policeman is kicking, elbowing his partner, and they go out and they start helping. So it's certainly a dramatization, but it shows what young people bring to the table, new energy and new perspectives. And it also demonstrates youth-adult partnerships in my mind.
Julie, this is Andrew here. Sorry, I know that we've done these trainings before, and I'm just curious to share this, but I would say this is one of the biggest areas that's often overlooked, with biggest misperceptions when it comes to service learning, is that they often miss that community aspect and that deeper understanding of community and how the problem that they might be focusing on relates to the community. Would you agree to that?
I would absolutely agree. And I think it's an opportunity for partnerships between community-based organizations, and also how it changes the perspective. I said it before, not kids, but kids these days. So it's really changing that. But I do think that it has such an impact on some of the real issues in your community. And I think it is an opportunity to bring different factions of your community together. We organized a day of service in our community many years ago, and it brought out all of this. And while that wasn't necessarily service learning for everyone, it was for the young people, but it brought all people together to see how working together, we all do better when we all do better. So thank you for that, Andrew. Thank you. So let's see, we have 56. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to put you in, sounds like such a teacherly thing to do, not my, I'd like you to think about this question for a minute. Why do you want to use service learning? I'm going to ask you to go in I wonder if I can do this. I don't know if I have, yeah, here we go, breakout rooms. Sorry, guys. I'd like you to spend 5, 7, 8 minutes talking with each other about why you want to use service learning. I know sometimes it's a risk to go into these rooms, but I think what you'll find is that sometimes somebody else is saying why they're wanting to use service learning, and you hadn't thought about that before. So I like to look at the wisdom in the room, and I think you all have a lot that you're bringing to the table. So I will then, so first question is why do you want to use service learning? I am then going to share with you a Padlet link. And a Padlet is just an online bulletin board, and somebody from your group can then post what you came up with on that Padlet. On that Padlet is also a list from all the other trainings I've done in the last couple of weeks. So you'll also see why other people are using service learning. So it's a way to kind of bring our community connected. So I'm going to send you all to breakout rooms. Again, why do you want to use service learning? Okay, here we go. To Bobby Phillips and Eloise Jackson and Casey and Malcolm, do you need me to resend you? Okay, there goes Malcolm. Evelyn, can I help you find the room? Lucetta, Nicey, Nisi. Karen, how about you? Is anybody needing to have some help getting into a breakout room? I see Carlene is somebody, if she's,
I was in, this is Rachel speaking. I was in the room with Carlene, but when I asked, was she there? I didn't hear anything. So,
oh, okay.
So if I can join back, let's see.
All right.
I'm going to join back and see.
Let me see. Okay, I'll see what I can do here.
Some people may not be accepting the invitation, and that might be why they didn't join.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see Carlene has come back to the main session now.
All right, do you know what room you were in?
5.
Let me go there. All right, I'm going to try to send you there again.
Okay, now you have to send Carlene back too, because there's no one there.
Okay, I'm going to send you to a different room.
Okay.
Pay attention to time here, 5:24. So Alicia or Cloredden or Kay Taylor or Cecilia, can I help you with finding a room?
Yes, Alicia was disconnected before placing in the room.
Okay, let me find another room for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. This isn't a perfect science. Hopefully that works. Good. Ashley, do you know if there's another workshop right after this?
Let me look really quickly. I don't think so, though. Yeah, this is the last one of the day. If you feel like you're running over, you can continue the conversation in the forum. That's something, if you want to start a forum discussion, if you feel like there's anything else, any other questions in case.
Yeah.
I know we have about like 10, what is it, like 15 minutes? Around 15, 17 minutes.
Never enough time.
It
Never
really is.
enough time.
Once you get into it, it's never enough time.
Yeah. So do you happen to remember when we went into this? Was it like
Into the breakouts or into the session?
into the breakouts? Yeah. I think it was 24.
Oh, this particular breakout.
Yes.
Yes. I want to say, yeah, it was about 5 minutes ago.
Give them just a few more minutes. So you said you're in Virginia, is that right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. What do you, so this is your job then?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long, you must be so busy with COVID. This must be such an active product.
Oh, yes. Virtual events. You would be surprised. There's a lot of virtual events because there's a lot of events. I mean, so many events for things I didn't even know existed. So
I was talking to a young man who does things with bunnies. He's got a service bunny organization because bunnies keep people relaxed. And he actually has bunnies show up. He charges, I don't know, X amount of dollars, and the bunnies show up in the Zoom calls.
That is so precious.
Isn't that funny?
That's precious. It's
Yeah.
kind of funny because my best friend, she actually works at the company with me, and she has bunnies, and sometimes they're in her Zoom calls.
Yep. Well, now we did a conference, the group that I work for did a conference about a month ago, and we had bunny breakouts. So you just show up in one of the breakout rooms and you just watch these bunnies. It was so funny. I loved it. It was a great stress reliever, actually.
That's so precious.
Isn't that funny?
I love it. I love bunnies. They're so cute.
I'm going to ask people to write it in the it's a long day for me. Write it in the Padlet. And I'm going to say 2 more minutes. There might be, Ashley, I'm looking at some of the people who didn't go into the breakout rooms. Would it be that they might be on a phone?
It's very possible. Either way, so it should work on the phone, but either way, they may have just not accepted the invite. Perhaps they went to the bathroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that happens. But at least most everybody went. So, all right, I'm going to close the rooms. People coming back. That's great. Oh, somebody said that they weren't able to get the Padlet link. So what I'm going to do is for everyone, I'm sorry about that. Here's the Padlet link, and you can do that at your leisure because I have a few more things that I want to get through to, but I put the Padlet link in the chat box right now. I broadcasted it, and it must not have worked, or I must need to do something different. I have lots to learn, and Ashley's going to keep teaching me about all that kind of stuff. Anybody want to share why you want to use service learning? Unmute yourself and share.
Hi, this is Gayla Mack in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with the Big Buddy program. And so it was funny because in our group, we had the other person from Big Buddy and then 2 members from Tallulah School. And they teach pre-K, I think, in 1st grade. So And what we discussed is we said that the reasons we would want to have service learning is one, to help young people understand how their gifts contribute to the overall community. One of the teachers said that, it's learning by doing. We already know that by doing things, you learn more. And then Elizabeth said is just having them have an experience that they can take with them and really learn about the things that they can do in life. Elizabeth shared that she is very connected to service learning because that's how she got involved and where she is today, is through service learning.
Awesome. Thank you, Galen. Anyone else want to unmute and share?
Okay, well, in my group, I'm Precious Fuller. Hello, everyone. In my group, we talked about how service learning is practical. It helps produce empathy and helps with relationship building, and it teaches to give back. And we even emphasize or mention how in this age where there's so much with cell phone usage and then gaming, that's just private unless they're playing with someone, but it helps them to look outside of that and to be less self-absorbed and to actually reach out to others. So, and then I like the part, this came out too, that you said at the end, before we broke out, Julie, of how people can't say, well, how does this relate to the real world? When are we gonna ever use that? That's what I meant by the practical. It's in use. It just makes sense. And it's like you can be learning and not even knowing you're learning because you're so busy doing good for others. And yeah, and the payback you get from that is not why you do it, but you can't go away from it without feeling good about that, of what you're doing or have done for others, but you don't know it until you've done it. I think someone said that. But it's just so rich.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Precious. Any other thoughts? Thank you so much, both Galen and Precious. Anybody else want to unmute? We have time for one more. Well, there might be a couple of chats here.
I can go ahead and share, Julie. In our group, we talked about kind of the community aspect perspective. I shared about how we sometimes have funders and organizations that are really interested in service learning because of that community awareness aspect. A pressing problem, and how is the community relating to it? There was a big interest when New Orleans was ground zero for the COVID outbreak, an interest from the Dorset Brown Foundation to really look at service learning and how is it impacting the community and building that awareness, that community awareness aspect for solving the problem. We also talked about how it also gets the kids to interact with one another and really heighten those SEL awareness skills, because a lot of them live in social media bubbles that can foster stereotypes. And what the group work aspect does is really break down those barriers and allow for some good group work and one-on-one interaction.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew. And boy, those are all really important aspects. I think considering the why of what we do is also really important, especially if you're bringing this idea to your group, to your school, to your principal, to your administrator. You need to know your why too. That's a whole nother workshop at how to develop your why, but we're not doing it just because it's one more thing to do. So please read I think Karen made a comment and Candace made a comment. So please feel free to read through the chat box. I'm also going to place that Padlet link just because that way you're able to connect with other people and to look at that. So at your leisure, I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes just going really quickly over some resources that I really encourage you to check out. These are all free resources from nylc.org. If you go to nylc.org/store, don't be fooled by that. You don't have to pay for them. You just have to sign in and you'll be sent these resources. The first resource I want to talk about is called Getting Started in Service Learning. And this is really connects to if you're doing K-12 service learning in the classroom, because it helps you connect to standards, although there's lots of really important resources within that book. There's a fillable unit plan outline, there are community partner maps, there's other fillable resources that we think have been helpful for people who are trying to create a unit aligned to curricular resources, though I think it also applies to out of school work. The next resource is a series of three tools. We call them the Engage series. They're a handbook for after school programs, and they're leveled. There's an elementary, there's a middle, and there's a high school. And within each of these Engage books are a series of lesson plans. So you pick whatever issue you want to address. And lesson 1 will give you the process, and you fill in some of the other guts of it, kind of what the issue is. But there's always an opener, there's always some content, and there's always a closing, like an exit ticket. So it's almost a complete curriculum, but you fill in the pieces that work best for you. Then our next series, we do a lot of work around the global goals, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And so these are kind of the areas of issue areas is what I'm trying to say, issue areas. So these are what we hope, what the UN has established as what we hope we can achieve by 2030. So we have developed 4 handbooks. Another one is coming out. And this is, again, very much the same 13 sessions with content, an opener content and a closer. But they are more topic specific. There's one on education equity. There's one on health and well-being. We did another one on health and well-being using a virtual platform. So it's all for online. And we've had a lot of people in this last year use this resource as a way to engage their out of school youth in something that's meaningful and real. And then our last topic area is peace, justice, and strong institutions. So it's really about peace building, which again, and these are geared more towards middle and high school. We will be releasing our next one in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, and it focuses on climate change. So the climate crisis, which I think a lot of middle and high school students are concerned about. So I ask you, kind of our final thought today. What's your next step? Open up your chat. Open up your chat and share what's your next step. You're going to go to the website, you're going to talk to your team, you're going to say, oh, forget it, she's been talking too much. Or you're going to say, I'm going to put together a team of people, or I'm going to talk to my administrator. What is your next step? Open up your chat, please. Talk with the admin and the team. All right, Myra. To be for the team. Patricia, you come talk to me if your schools are ready to get started. And Andrew, you want to talk a little bit about what?
I just want to stress that service learning is a big part of our network. And for those of you who are not aware, we have a network newsletter and also the Louisiana Afterschool roundtables, where we get together monthly and talk about pressing issues for local programs, but also national perspectives. And we do have some service learning mini grant opportunities coming available that we will be promoting. And we are very glad to work with the NLC as a partner in promoting that work. So we will definitely have some follow-up opportunities available. And I encourage you to continue to monitor the newsletter on a monthly basis and participate in our roundtables. And we will definitely work with Julie to see if we can schedule a little follow-up presentation during one of our roundtables this summer.
So I want to leave you, I want to respect our time, and it's 5:44. I want to leave you, we don't have time for Kid President, but next time when I come talk to you again, I've got some more tricks up my sleeve. This is my email, jrbascom@nylc.org. If you have any questions, you want to share a story, you want to you want to have a chat about what your next steps could be, please reach out to me. This is good and important work, and I think you'll find that that there is a community of people in the service learning world that are as excited as I am about this work. Thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege to be with you, and have a fabulous rest of your conference.